Man, I can't believe this. Master Roshi used to be the second most important character in the series. Now he's basically not even part of the story. Man, I can't believe this. Tien Shinhan used to be the second most important character in the series. Now he's basically not even part of the story. Man, I can't believe this. Piccolo used...
A few moments later.
So this video has been on my mind for quite some time now. It's actually quite a common complaint about the series. It produced so many amazing and interesting characters, only to shove them into the background, never to be relevant again. When people bring this up, it's almost exclusively as one of the big flaws of the story, and I'll spoil the video a bit here. I'd like to potentially challenge that idea, and possibly convince you it's actually necessary for the greater good of the story. Basically, I'm going to briefly go over the worst victims of this trend. Afterwards, I'll explain why it was a necessary evil in the name of good storytelling. I also don't want to fall into background character status myself. If you want to help me keep that from happening, I'd appreciate if you would consider subscribing, or leaving a like to help boost the channel. So our first victim is actually Yamcha. We might forget now, but when originally introduced, he was considered an actual threat. He was also the quickest character to fall into irrelevance, as after completing his arc, actually being the hero who saves the day at the end of the first arc of the story, and overcoming his fear of women. He does stick around, but usually he's only there to lose to a newer character to show how powerful they are. Following Yamcha, we get Master Roshi, who really takes over the manga in his time, driving the plot forward and carrying the narrative as he nurtures his students to grow, not wanting them to win, as it would build their egos and stunt their drive for growth. Unlike Yamcha, who becomes irrelevant after his prime, Master Roshi remains a relevant character for 2 more arcs afterwards, still being the most important character in terms of pushing the narrative forward during the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai, spending the arc seeding thoughts of doubt in Tien Shinhan, who really had a good heart, and was just in with the wrong crowd. Afterwards, delivering the necessary exposition about Piccolo, and eventually falling victim to Piccolo himself, showing that he too eventually fell into the trend of losing to the new villain to show how strong they were. And it's worth noting that, like Yamcha, Roshi really completed his arc right before this, really feeling like his work as Goku and Krillin's master was finished around the 22nd tournament. Following Roshi is the man who he spiritually passed the torch to, Tien Shinhan. Tien Shinhan was a big step for the series, as he was an actually imposing, overarching villain for an entire arc. Tien goes through an arc about realizing what he really cares about. Instead of pursuing empty things like pride and revenge, he realized that he's just in it for the thrill of the fight. He goes on to lose to the new villain as an example to show how strong they are. Finally, the real big one is our main man Piccolo. By far, Piccolo has the longest run out of any of these characters. While he loses his position as Goku's main rival, he maintains his relevance long after, and even after becoming irrelevant power-wise, he's still an important part of the story. Piccolo early on is just evil incarnate, but over the course of being reincarnated and spending a year with Goku's son Gohan, his shell breaks. Piccolo's arc really ended all the way back when he sacrificed himself for Gohan in the Saiyan saga. After that, he sticks around due to his connection with the all-important Dragon Balls. It's a moment of note when he decides he needs to fuse with Kami in order to save Earth, and ultimately become a different person, while still being the same in a lot of ways. Piccolo, like the others, falls victim to being made an example to show the new villain's power multiple times, against Nappa, Frieza, and Cell. But, out of all of the characters listed, he by far made it out the best. Now, there's one more guy I feel the need to mention, our boy Krillin. Krillin, unlike most others, was literally never perceived as on the level of any of our other characters, always being clearly weaker than Son Goku. Krillin carries a lot more comedic tones than everyone else, and I think that gave him a special place in Toriyama's heart, being allowed to maintain his relevance for nearly the entire manga. When Krillin finally does fade into the background, it's only after he's finally got to be the recipient of a satisfying story arc, that being his relationship with Android 18, ultimately deciding not to kill her, as while possibly motivated by other reasons. It's primarily due to his view that they aren't bad people and don't deserve to be killed, and after that, like everyone else, after this arc is completed, he fades into the background. So, I think we've noticed some common trends. Characters often serve their purpose, fulfilling their arc, going on to become an example to show the power of the next big character. It can be hard to watch these satisfying arcs becoming attached to these characters, only for them to become irrelevant and not get to see them be important parts of the story anymore. And like I said earlier, this is often seen as a con of the story. Now, I would like to make a comparison to another popular story that I greatly enjoy, One Piece. Now, I'll try and make my point here with as little spoilers as possible, as you're robbing yourself the experience of a lifetime, not experience this masterpiece yourself. Generally, One Piece takes a lot of inspiration from Dragon Ball. One thing it does great is how it gives all of its characters satisfying arcs. Unlike Dragon Ball, every main character in One Piece remains somewhat relevant indefinitely. Mostly, this is seen as a huge boon for One Piece, but this is where I want to make my comparison. In One Piece, during the first half of the story, Oda really gets to focus on a few characters, really fleshing each one of them out. But, as the story went on over the last 20 years, the main crew of the story has only grew, and we reach an unfortunate inevitability. A manga can only focus on so many characters per arc. When the main crew was only like 3 to 5 members, everyone had lots to do. But nowadays, there's so many characters that some of them have little to do, and really only get 1 to 2 chapters to shine per arc. This is the unfortunate opposite of the Dragon Ball approach. While characters in Dragon Ball enter the story shining like a star, they also burn out just as fast. While the One Piece crew gives everyone a candle, and while they certainly are still burning, it's nowhere near as bright as some of the Dragon Ball characters were during their time to shine. Now, please don't take this as One Piece slander. I won't have that. One Piece is goated, and the story is amazing nearly all of the time. It just feels like there's not enough screen time to go around sometimes. A similar example is Bleach. Much more prominently than One Piece, Bleach will go on long tangents, giving everyone in its massive background cast a fight during each arc. And while some love this approach, it does have a weird consequence on the main story, taking forever to tell what would otherwise be a pretty short, compelling story about our main hero Ichigo and his struggles. And once more, this is not me publicly denouncing Bleach. I also think Bleach is goated. But this is just one thing from the story that puts off some people. Basically what I'm trying to say is that while it's unfortunate that so many beloved characters in Dragon Ball become irrelevant, it's ultimately why the main story is so tight and consistently compelling, as the characters who are relevant during each arc are given all of the necessary screen time they need to shine themselves, just like their predecessors. Now, a lot of my general videos like this tend to focus on the original manga and not get too much into the differing paths of future Dragon Ball productions. But due to the nature of this video, it would feel wrong to not talk about our boy Son Gohan. Gohan is arguably more of a main character than Goku during Dragon Ball Z, going through an arc that takes him all the way to the Cell Saga to complete. But unlike the humans, Gohan was still just as relevant as Goku for most of the final arc. If Toriyama had decided to go into a slightly different direction in the Buu Saga, we could have easily ended the story with Gohan defeating Buu instead of Goku taking over. Basically, I'm saying Gohan was still extremely relevant in the Buu Saga, even being the strongest single character at the end of the story. But when they decided to continue the story later in Super and GT, Gohan finally fell behind, like so many before him. Gohan's fall-off is actually wild to think about retroactively, since he was always such a big part of the Z story, and we even get the trademark villain beating him to show how strong they are, in both of the Super movies. Finally, at the end of Dragon Ball Super, Gohan has finally returned to main character status in the superhero movie. Though, even in that, it's really about Piccolo, and Gohan is just there as well. Something to think about though, is how the superhero movie acknowledges that a good story needs to focus on a few characters, and decides to sideline Goku and Vegeta in order to make room for Gohan and Piccolo. I'm pretty happy with how this script turned out. Hopefully I got the idea across. And I also hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.